The night sky above Montana's Bitterroot Mountains erupted with an unnatural light, painting the snowy landscape in shades of electric blue. Dr. Eleanor Maxwell stood transfixed on her cabin porch, coffee forgotten in her hand as the object, too controlled to be a meteor, too erratic to be a plane, descended in a spiraling path toward the forest 2 miles north. Eleanor, a 42-year-old xenobiologist whose controversial theories had exiled her from academia to this remote research station, felt her heart quicken. After 15 years of scanning the skies, analyzing atmospheric anomalies, and being ridiculed by her peers, validation might lie smoking in the pines. Theo, she called to her research assistant, who emerged bleary-eyed from the cabin. Get the emergency kit and the thermal imaging equipment. Now. Theodore Banks, a brilliant graduate student who had followed his mentor into professional exile, didn't question. Within minutes, they were navigating the snowy terrain in Eleanor's rugged all-terrain vehicle, headlights cutting through the darkness as they followed the coordinates from Eleanor's satellite tracker. The craft had carved a quarter-mile trench through the forest before coming to rest in a clearing. Its metallic hull gleamed despite the impact, a perfect oval roughly the size of a small bus, with no visible seams or windows. Steam rose where snowflakes melted against its surface. "Stay back," Eleanor cautioned, approaching slowly with a radiation detector in hand. "Readings are normal, but there could be toxic materials." As if responding to her voice, a section of the hull suddenly liquefied, forming a small aperture. Eleanor and Theo froze, watching as a figure emerged, not the towering humanoid of science fiction, but a small, trembling form no larger than a human child. The being stumbled forward, its translucent skin revealing a complex network of luminescent veins pulsing beneath. Large, multifaceted eyes dominated its face, reflecting the flashlight beams in prismatic patterns. It made a sound, a high, musical keening that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine. "It's freezing," Theo whispered as the creature collapsed onto the snow, its skin taking on a bluish tinge where it contacted the frozen ground. Eleanor shed her heavy coat without hesitation, wrapping it around the alien child. Up close, she could see that its skin wasn't just cold, it was developing crystalline patterns, as though freezing from the inside out. "Their biology must operate at much higher temperatures," she said, lifting the surprisingly light form. "Their homeworld must be significantly warmer than Earth." The alien's eyes fixed on Eleanor's face, communicating a fear and desperation that transcended species. A delicate, six-fingered hand emerged from the coat, touching Eleanor's cheek with surprising gentleness. Eleanor gasped as images flooded her mind, a distant sun, red and swollen, a world of amber skies and floating cities, an enormous vessel breaking apart in space, escape pods launching in all directions, a parent's face contorted in grief as the child was sealed inside. "It's telepathic," she breathed, cradling the being closer. "And it's a refugee. Possibly the last of its kind. What do we do?" Theo asked, eyes wide as he studied the spacecraft. "Call the authorities?" Eleanor thought of government laboratories, of dissection tables and endless experiments. She thought of the fear in those alien eyes and the trust in that gentle touch. "No," she said firmly. "We take it to the research station. Create a heated environment. Study and protect it. This isn't just the scientific discovery of the millennium, Theo, it's a child. And it needs our help." As they made their way back through the snow, the alien nestled against Eleanor's chest, its trembling gradually subsiding in the warmth of human compassion. Above them, stars glittered coldly in the vast darkness, while somewhere beyond, the remains of a civilization drifted in the cosmic void, and perhaps, other survivors searched for sanctuary among the stars. The research facility hummed with the sound of hastily assembled heat lamps and humidity regulators. For 3 days, Dr. Eleanor Maxwell had barely slept, monitoring the alien child's vital signs through equipment modified to detect unfamiliar biological patterns. The being, whom she had begun calling Nova in her notes, lay in a transparent enclosure where the temperature held steady at 103 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity approaching tropical rainforest levels. "Core temperature stabilizing," Theo reported, studying the thermal imaging display. "Whatever passes for blood in its system seems to be flowing more consistently now." Eleanor nodded, relief washing over her exhausted features. She pressed her palm against the transparent barrier, watching as Nova's iridescent eyes tracked the movement. The alien skin had regained its translucent quality, the crystalline patterns that had formed in the snow now completely dissolved. Beneath that transparency, complex organs pulsed with bioluminescent activity. "I think we've managed to create a reasonable approximation of its homeworld environment," Eleanor said. "But we're just guessing. We need better communication." As if responding to her words, Nova raised a delicate six-fingered hand, mirroring Eleanor's gesture on the other side of the barrier. The moment their hands aligned, separated only by the transparent material, Eleanor felt the same rush of images she'd experienced in the clearing, a bustling alien metropolis suspended in amber clouds, beings similar to Nova but taller, more developed, complex machinery integrated with biological components. "It's trying to communicate again," she whispered to Theo, who quickly grabbed a tablet to record her descriptions. This time, however, the images came with emotions, gratitude, curiosity, and lingering fear. Eleanor closed her eyes, focusing on projecting her own thoughts: safety, protection, friendship. When she opened them again, Nova was studying her with intense concentration. I think it understood me," Eleanor said. The next morning, Eleanor made a decision. Against Theo's concerned objections, she entered the enclosure wearing only light clothing appropriate for the tropical conditions. Nova retreated to the far corner, watching warily as Eleanor settled cross-legged on the floor. "It's okay," she said softly, extending her empty hands. "I just want to understand you better." Hours passed as they sat in silent communion. Gradually, Nova inched closer until they sat face to face. The alien child reached out, 6 fingers spreading to touch Eleanor's temples. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her body, and suddenly her mind was flooded not with images but with concepts, ideas, language, linguistic patterns so alien yet somehow becoming comprehensible. When Nova finally withdrew its touch, Eleanor was trembling, tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay?" Theo called through the intercom, his voice tight with worry. "I'm fine," Eleanor replied, her voice unsteady. "More than fine. I understand now. At least partly." Over the next week, their communication evolved rapidly. Eleanor learned that Nova's species, the Lamidians, had developed telepathic abilities as their primary form of communication. Their homeworld, orbiting a red giant star, had been destabilizing for generations. The evacuation had been planned, but their vessel had encountered an unexpected stellar phenomenon that scattered the escape pods across multiple star systems. "You're looking for your family," Eleanor said one evening as they shared a meal, Eleanor eating a sandwich while Nova absorbed nutrient-rich vapors from a solution Theo had developed based on atmospheric compositions from Nova's memories. "Yes. Others must have survived. Parent units would seek habitable worlds like yours." The words formed in Eleanor's mind, accompanied by images of similar pods landing on various planets. "Earth might not be considered habitable for your kind," Eleanor pointed out gently. "The temperature, the atmosphere, they're not ideal for you." "Adaptable. Our bodies change slowly to new environments. Young ones change faster." Eleanor had noticed this adaptation. Nova required less extreme heat now, and brief exposures to Earth's normal atmosphere caused less distress than before. That night, as Nova slept in the enclosure, Eleanor sat at her desk reviewing her notes. The alien child's biology was remarkable, photosynthetic properties combined with complex neural structures unlike anything on Earth. If word got out about Nova's existence, the scientific community would descend like vultures, not to mention military and intelligence agencies. Her satellite phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed Dr. Jason Harding, her former colleague at the National Research Institute. "Eleanor," his voice crackled through the poor connection. "Strange reports coming from your region. Satellite anomalies, energy signatures. The Department of Defense is asking questions. Thought you should know." After hanging up, Eleanor gazed at Nova's sleeping form, delicate chest rising and falling in the moonlight filtering through the laboratory windows. She had found something miraculous, a bridge between worlds, a child who had placed its trust in her hands. And now she would have to protect that trust, whatever the cost. The helicopter's rhythmic thudding penetrated the research station's insulated walls, growing louder by the second. Eleanor's hands trembled as she hastily packed essential supplies into a duffel bag. "They're landing in the clearing," Theo reported, peering through the blinds. "Black helicopter, no markings. 3 men in suits, 2 in tactical gear." Eleanor zipped the bag closed and turned to Nova, who stood perfectly still in the center of the lab, large eyes reflecting the flashing monitors that displayed approaching heat signatures. "Danger hunters. Like those who pursued my kind before," Nova projected, the telepathic message tinged with images of beings in protective suits capturing Limidians. "Not exactly the same, but the intent might be similar," Eleanor replied softly. "They'll want to study you, maybe use your abilities for their own purposes." The main door to the research station buzzed, someone requesting entry. Eleanor ignored it, continuing her preparations. "Dr. Maxwell, I know you're in there," a male voice called through the intercom. "This is Agent Daniel Reeves with the National Security Division. We need to discuss the unidentified craft that entered our atmosphere last week." Eleanor exchanged glances with Theo, whose face had gone pale. "How long before they force entry?" she asked. 10 minutes, maybe less," he replied. "The security system won't hold against government override codes." Eleanor knelt before Nova, taking the alien child's 6-fingered hands in her own. "We need to hide you. Can you maintain Earth's atmospheric conditions for a short time?" Nova's skin rippled, the bioluminescent patterns beneath shifting to a deeper blue. "Yes. Adaptation progressing. Can endure standard conditions for approximately 47 minutes before cellular distress." "Perfect. That gives us a window." Eleanor turned to Theo. "We need a distraction." 20 minutes later, Agent Reeves and his team had secured the main laboratory. They moved methodically through the space, photographing equipment and downloading data from Eleanor's computers. Eleanor sat rigidly in a chair, arms crossed, while Theo stood nervously by the environmental control panel. "You understand our concern, Dr. Maxwell," Reeves said, his tone conversational despite the armed men flanking him. "An unidentified object of extraterrestrial origin crashes on U.S. soil, and instead of reporting it, a known enthusiast in xenobiology decides to handle it privately." "I reported an unusual meteorological phenomenon," Eleanor replied evenly. "Which is precisely what I observed. My research focuses on atmospheric anomalies that might indicate extraterrestrial life. Not actual encounters." Reeves smiled thinly, glancing around the lab. "Then perhaps you can explain the purpose of this environmental chamber? The one maintaining temperatures more suitable for Venus than Montana?" "Experimental moss cultivation," Theo supplied quickly. "Dr. Maxwell believes certain extremophile organisms could help us understand how life might evolve on other planets." One of the tactical officers approached Reeves, speaking in low tones. The agent's expression hardened. "Dr. Maxwell, our scans indicate a biological signature unlike anything in our database. It was present in this facility within the past hour." His hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. "Where is it?" Eleanor maintained her calm demeanor. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Search the entire facility," Reeves ordered his men. And Dr. Maxwell, Dr. Banks, consider yourselves in protective custody until we complete our investigation. As the agents dispersed throughout the facility, Eleanor caught Theo's eye and nodded slightly. He casually moved to a nearby console, entering a series of commands that seemed routine but actually activated a protocol they had designed years ago for an entirely different purpose. The facility's lights flickered once, twice, then plunged into darkness. Emergency generators hummed to life, casting the lab in dim red lighting. System reboot, Theo explained innocently. Happens sometimes with the power grid out here. In the momentary confusion, Eleanor slipped her hand into her pocket, pressing a small device that sent a signal to the facility's rear storage area. Dr. Marcus Jordan had arrived at the facility just 3 days earlier, answering Eleanor's cryptic request for help from an old friend. Now, in the storage area that the agents hadn't yet reached, he carefully lifted Nova from a hidden compartment beneath the floor. The alien child's skin had dulled to a grayish tone, a camouflage response triggered by stress. Mind hunters getting closer, Nova projected weakly. Sense their thought patterns. Just hold on a little longer, Marcus whispered, wrapping Nova in thermal blankets. We're getting you out of here. While the agents focused on the main facility, Marcus slipped through the emergency exit with Nova, making his way toward the vehicle they had prepared and hidden in the forest. As he drove away through the back trails, Theo's distraction protocol triggered Phase 2, a cascading equipment failure that released harmless but visually alarming smoke throughout the laboratory. In the ensuing evacuation, Eleanor managed to break away from her escort, disappearing into the woods along a prearranged route. By midnight, she had rendezvoused with Marcus and Nova at an abandoned hunting cabin 20 miles from the research station. "How is our friend?" Eleanor asked, rushing to Nova's side. "Stressed but stable," Marcus replied. His dark eyes, behind round wire-rimmed glasses, studied the alien with fascination and concern. "The improvised thermal suit is maintaining adequate temperatures, but it's not a long-term solution." Eleanor checked Nova's vital signs with a portable device she had designed. "We bought ourselves some time, but they'll track us eventually. Facial recognition, satellite surveillance, we can't hide forever." Nova stirred, multifaceted eyes opening to study the 3 humans. "Others come. My kind. Received distress signal from Crashcraft. Will arrive in 7 Earth rotations." Eleanor, Marcus, and Theo exchanged shocked glances. "Your people are coming here? To Earth?" Eleanor asked. "Yes. Rescue craft approaches. Must reach signal point for detection." Marcus spread a map on the cabin's dusty table. "Where is this signal point?" Nova touched the map, 6 fingers splaying across its surface. Images filled their minds: a mountain plateau, a specific alignment of stars, a narrow window of time. "The painted hills in Oregon," Eleanor translated. "But that's over 500 miles from here, through multiple states. With federal agents searching for us." Marcus folded the map decisively. "Then we'd better start driving." The vintage Jeep Cherokee rattled along the back roads of Idaho, its suspension groaning with each pothole. Dr. Eleanor Maxwell gripped the steering wheel tightly, eyes constantly flicking between the road and the rear-view mirror. In the passenger seat, Dr. Marcus Jordan monitored a tablet displaying Nova's vital signs, while the alien child lay across the back seat, cocooned in the makeshift thermal suit. "Temperature dropping again," Marcus reported, his voice tight with concern. "The portable heaters are struggling to maintain optimal conditions." Eleanor nodded grimly. They had been driving for 3 days, avoiding major highways and staying off the grid as much as possible. Theo had remained behind as a decoy, claiming ignorance about Eleanor's departure when questioned by Agent Reeves. His last message indicated that the government team had established a perimeter around the research station and were analyzing every piece of data. "How much farther to the rendezvous point?" Eleanor asked, squinting at the road sign as they passed. About 200 miles, Marcus replied. But Nova's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. The adaptation process seems to have plateaued. Eleanor glanced back at Nova, whose normally luminescent skin had dulled to an ashen gray. The alien's eyes were closed, but a faint telepathic connection remained, broadcasting discomfort and increasing weakness. We need to stop somewhere, Eleanor decided. Find a way to boost the thermal system. As night fell, they pulled into an abandoned barn they had spotted from the road. Marcus quickly set up their equipment while Eleanor gently transferred Nova to a nest of thermal blankets. I need to check something, she said, carefully opening a panel on Nova's thermal suit. The heating element might be failing. As she worked, Nova's eyes fluttered open, fixing on Eleanor's face. Dream memories coming. Of home world. Of parent units. Eleanor paused, placing her hand on Nova's forehead, which felt unnaturally cool. Tell me about your home, she whispered. Images flooded Eleanor's mind, vast cities floating in amber clouds, beings like Nova gathering in crystalline structures that amplified their telepathic connections, a culture built on shared consciousness and collective memory. Your world so different. Separate minds. Separate purposes. Yet you help me. Why? Because compassion transcends difference, Eleanor replied softly. Because you're a child, lost and alone, and that matters more than where you come from. Nova's six-fingered hand reached up to touch Eleanor's cheek. You would be welcomed by my kind. Your mind patterns, harmonious. The intimate moment was shattered by headlights sweeping across the barn wall. Marcus doused their lantern immediately, moving to the window. Government vehicle, he hissed. How did they find us? Eleanor cursed under her breath. The thermal signature. They must have satellites tracking unusual heat patterns. She quickly began disconnecting the heating equipment. We need to move. Now. They barely made it to the jeep before flashlight beams cut through the darkness. As Marcus started the engine, a voice called out, Dr. Maxwell. Stop where you are. Eleanor cradled Nova in her arms as they sped away, gravel spraying behind them. In the rearview mirror, she could see figures rushing to their vehicles. They'll set up roadblocks, Marcus said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We won't make it to Oregon by road. Eleanor's mind raced. The interstate is only 10 miles north. There's a small regional airport just beyond it. You still have your pilot's license, right? Marcus shot her a surprised look. It's been years, but yes. You're suggesting we steal a plane? Borrow, Eleanor corrected, managing a grim smile. For the sake of interstellar diplomacy. 2 hours later, as dawn broke over the western states, a small Cessna soared through the early morning sky. Marcus handled the controls with returned confidence, while Eleanor monitored Nova, whose condition had worsened during their escape. The higher altitude isn't helping, she said, adjusting the portable heater. And we're burning through our battery reserves for the thermal suit. Signal point closer now, Nova projected weakly. Can feel kin presence approaching system. Eleanor checked their coordinates against the map. We'll be at the Painted Hills in less than an hour. Just hold on, Nova. The landscape below transformed gradually from dense forests to the ochre and rust-colored striations of Oregon's high desert. As they approached their destination, Marcus pointed to the horizon. Company, he said tersely. Military helicopters, coming in fast. Eleanor's heart sank as she spotted the dark shapes approaching. Can we outrun them? Not in this, Marcus replied, already beginning descent procedures. But we can land before they intercept us. There's a flat area near the signal point. The landing was rough on the unprepared terrain, the Cessna bouncing and skidding to a stop just as the helicopters appeared overhead. Eleanor didn't hesitate, gathering Nova in her arms and sprinting toward the elevated plateau that matched the alien's mental image. Marcus followed close behind, carrying their remaining equipment. The morning sun cast long shadows across the painted landscape as they climbed, the sound of helicopter rotors growing louder. There. Marcus pointed to a natural bowl formation at the summit, perfectly aligned with the coordinates Nova had indicated. They reached the formation just as figures in tactical gear began ascending the slope behind them. Eleanor gently placed Nova in the center of the bowl, where the alien child lay motionless, skin now almost transparent with stress. "Where is the rescue craft?" Eleanor asked desperately, scanning the clear blue sky. "Coming," Nova projected, the telepathic voice now barely a whisper in their minds. "But failing, adaptation breaking down." Eleanor knelt beside Nova, tears streaming down her face as she took the alien's six-fingered hand in hers. Behind them, Agent Reeves appeared at the edge of the bowl, flanked by armed men. "Dr. Maxwell, step away from the extraterrestrial being," he ordered, weapon raised. "You don't understand," Eleanor said without looking back. "Nova is dying. This atmosphere, this planet, they're killing her. Her people are coming to help." "All the more reason to secure the asset," Reeves replied coldly. "This is a matter of national security now." Marcus moved to stand between them and Nova. "This is a child," he said firmly. "Not an asset." As tension mounted in the standoff, a strange silence suddenly fell over the plateau. The wind stopped. Birds ceased their calls. Then, a low hum began to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet, building to a resonance that made teeth rattle and vision blur. Above them, the clear morning sky rippled like disturbed water, and through that ripple emerged a craft unlike anything human eyes had seen before, an organic-looking vessel that seemed alive, its surface flowing and pulsing with the same bioluminescence that characterized Nova's species. Agent Reeves and his men stumbled back, weapons raised uncertainly at the impossible sight. The craft emitted no thrust, no visible means of propulsion, yet it descended with perfect precision until it hovered directly above the natural bowl. "Kincraft here," Nova projected, strength returning to the telepathic voice. "Home journey possible now." A beam of amber light descended from the craft, enveloping Nova in its glow. Eleanor felt the alien child's hand beginning to slip from hers as Nova was gently lifted from the ground. "Come with me," Nova suddenly projected, the thought directed solely at Eleanor. "Place for you among my kind. Your mind welcome. Your compassion needed." Eleanor gasped, looking up at the hovering craft, then back at the human world she had always known, represented now by men with guns and suspicion in their eyes. A world that had rejected her theories, pushed her to the margins of science, and would now threaten a child from the stars. The amber light began to widen, an invitation made manifest, as Nova waited suspended between two worlds, and Eleanor faced the most momentous decision of her life. The amber light bathed Eleanor's upturned face, casting her features in an otherworldly glow. Time seemed suspended as Nova hovered above, six-fingered hand still extended downward in invitation. Around them, Agent Reeves and his men stood transfixed, weapons lowered in awe of the spectacle unfolding before them. "Eleanor, don't," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the harmonic humming of the alien craft. "There's no coming back from this." Eleanor looked back at her colleague, her friend, seeing the concern in his eyes. Then she glanced at the government agents, their faces displaying a mixture of fear and calculating assessment. She knew what would happen if she stayed. Endless debriefings, her research confiscated, her discoveries controlled by those who saw only potential weapons and advantages. Decision time short, Nova projected. Craft cannot maintain Earth presence long. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the weight of worlds on her shoulders. "I'll come with you," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the magnitude of her choice. As she stepped fully into the amber beam, the light intensified, enveloping her completely. She felt her body becoming lighter, cellular vibrations increasing until the boundaries between herself and the surrounding energy began to blur. The painted hills, the agents, and Marcus all receded below as she ascended toward the craft alongside Nova. "Eleanor!" Marcus called out, his voice fading as the distance between them grew. Agent Reeves finally broke from his stupor, raising his weapon. "Fire," he ordered, but the bullets dissipated harmlessly in the energy fields surrounding Eleanor and Nova. The interior of the craft opened to receive them, a membrane-like portal that yielded and then sealed seamlessly behind them. Eleanor found herself in a chamber unlike anything human architecture could conceive, organic curves and flowing surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescence, an atmosphere dense with moisture and warmth that instantly eased the distress in Nova's form. Tall, elegant beings approached, adult Limidians with the same translucent skin and multifaceted eyes as Nova, but with more developed cranial structures and complex patterns of light flowing beneath their surfaces. They surrounded Nova, six-fingered hands touching the child in what Eleanor recognized as a greeting ritual from Nova's memories. "Gratitude offering to the Earth Protector," one of the adults projected, turning toward Eleanor. "You saved our young. Prevented species knowledge loss." Eleanor felt their telepathic presence, more controlled than Nova's, more precise, scanning her mind gently. "I did what anyone should have done," she replied, uncertain if verbal speech held meaning here. "Not true," came the response. "Others of your kind sought to claim possess our young. You sought only to protect return." The craft vibrated subtly, and through a transparent section of the wall, Eleanor watched Earth growing smaller, a blue marble receding into the vastness of space. A powerful wave of emotion washed over her, the realization that she had left behind everything familiar, everything human. "Transition difficulty natural," another Limidian projected, sensing her emotional turmoil. "Integration requires time patience." Over the following days, marked only by Eleanor's internal clock, as the craft operated on different temporal rhythms, she began to adapt to life among the Limidians. Their vessel was part of a larger fleet scattered across several star systems, gathering survivors from the diaspora of their dying homeworld. Nova remained her constant companion, acting as interpreter and guide. The young alien's health improved dramatically in the appropriate environment, the luminescence returning to full vibrancy beneath translucent skin. "Others like me were found on different worlds," Nova explained as they observed the stars from the craft's observation chamber. "Some worlds hostile, some worlds neutral, some worlds helpful. Earth was mixed." Eleanor smiled sadly. "That's an accurate assessment of humanity." As the vessel journeyed deeper into space, Eleanor's body began to change. The Limidians provided treatments that allowed her to adapt to their atmosphere and gravity. Her sensitivity to their telepathic communication grew stronger, though she retained her individual consciousness, a rarity that made her an object of fascination among her hosts. One cycle, as she floated in a regeneration chamber filled with nutrient-rich fluid, Eleanor felt a new presence enter her mind, more powerful than any she had encountered before. The Elder Guide, the oldest and wisest of the Limidian survivors, had finally come to meet the human who had saved one of their young. "Your decision to leave your world was unexpected," the Elder Guide projected. Analysis of human attachment patterns suggested probability against such sacrifice. Eleanor considered this. Humans are unpredictable. We can be selfish and destructive, but we're also capable of connection that transcends our own interests. "I found something in Nova that spoke to me, a bridge between worlds I'd always hoped existed." The Elder Guide's telepathic presence radiated approval. "You will help us understand humankind. And perhaps one day, when your species has evolved beyond its current limitations, you might serve as ambassador between our peoples." "What if they're not ready?" Eleanor asked, thinking of Agent Reeves and his team. "Then we wait. The universe is patient. And now, so are we." As the Limidian fleet approached its destination, a young star system with a habitable world they had prepared for colonization, Eleanor stood with Nova at the observation portal. Below them spread a landscape of amber skies and floating islands, reminiscent of the memories Nova had first shared back on Earth. New homeworld, Nova projected, excitement coloring the telepathic message. Will you help build our new society? Eleanor placed her hand against the portal, watching as her skin began to develop the faintest luminescence, the first visible sign of her physiological adaptation. She thought of the research station in Montana, of Theo and Marcus, of a life dedicated to searching the stars for exactly what she had found. She thought of Agent Reeves and what he would report back to his superiors, the woman who chose to leave humanity behind for the unknown. Yes, she said, both aloud and with her developing telepathic ability. I'll help build a bridge between our worlds, even if it takes generations to cross it. As the craft began its descent toward the new Lamidian homeworld, Eleanor felt Nova's hand slip into hers, 6 fingers intertwining with 5, a physical manifestation of the connection between species that had begun with compassion for a crying alien child on the verge of freezing, and now extended beyond the stars into a future neither world could have imagined alone. The amber light of their new sun bathed them both as they prepared for landing, 2 beings from distant worlds united by the most universal force in existence, the capacity to see beyond difference and recognize the sacred value of all life, wherever it might be found among the infinite possibilities of the cosmos.